So we can go ahead and get started. I do expect a few more people will probably filter in. But first of all, afternoon, everybody. I'm John Bell, the director of IDC's Dev Studio on campus. Um, First of all, thanks for choosing to spend the most precious of times Friday afternoon with us, as we're starting to think about where augmented and virtual reality are going to go in the near future. Now, a lot of times when we're talking about AR and VR, or as they're collectively called XR, we talk about how much fun we can have when we're playing games, or what a difference it makes to experience a data visualization or a cultural heritage site in 3D without necessarily thinking about all of the data that's moving behind the scenes to help make those applications work. Of course, for the last several years, we've also had a front row seat to watch what happens when privacy, security, and consideration of ethical implications are put on the back burner in the name of technological innovation. But the good news is that while most of us may not be thinking about XR in those terms yet, there are people who are. Our guest today, Kavya Pearlman, is often known as the Cyber Guardian and is the founder and CEO of the XR Safety Initiative, or XRSI. She's an award-winning cybersecurity professional with a deep interest in immersive and emerging technologies. Kavya has been named one of the top cybersecurity influencers for 3 consecutive years, from 2018 to 2020 by ISEC Global, and has previously advised Facebook on third-party security risks during the 2016 US presidential elections, and worked as the head of security for one of the oldest virtual worlds, Linden Labs' Second Life. Kavya is the co-host of the immersive podcast Singularity Watch, founder of the CyberXR Coalition that focuses on diversity and inclusion at the cross-section of cybersecurity and XR, has helped launch a trustworthy XR news platform, Ready Hacker One, as well as establishing a medical XR advisory council. So thanks to the support of the Digital Humanities and Social Engagement Cluster, the Department of Film and Media Studies, and ITC's Dev Studio, Kavya is here to talk about a new initiative that she recently launched, the XRSI Privacy and Safety Framework for XR and Spatial Computing. Throughout today's webinar, we're going to ask that you send in questions for Kavya in using the Q&A feature in Zoom, and she will respond to those questions following her talk. So without any further ado, I'm very happy to welcome Kavya Pearlman to the virtual stage here.
Thank you, John. And thank you everyone for attending and spending time with me, with all of us, and reflecting over this very, very important topic. Because technology can be used for both good and bad. So in a world where demagogues appeal to our worst instinct, conspiracy theories are peddled all over mainstream media through not just some antisocial element, but via the loudest voices with millions of followers in social media. In an era where scientific inquiry and critical thinking are ending, and we're moving fast towards a point of singularity without any pause or reflection on the risks and the rewards that come along with this kind of a velocity. Democracy that depends on the shared truth is threatened by autocracy, threatened an autocracy, which depends on the shared lies, is on the rise. Minorities like myself and many others are afraid to speak for the fear of retaliation from billionaires and the most powerful people on the planet Earth. This is the condition of our perceived reality. When it comes to XR, it all comes down to what kind of realities do we want to create. So in the next hour or so, we will reflect on this very question and review some of the past and look at the present condition and speculate what is to come in the future. So I have to begin with, of course, how it started. To understand where we are today, it is important to understand how technology evolves, how it impacts our lives globally, and why it matters. So I want you all to think about what could be a potential slide in the context of XR, which says, how is it going? So let's see what that could be. Um, Technology has literally, and I'm going to go through, this is a sort of a timeline, some things that I picked from various events, the significant events that have played out throughout the history. So let's look at the one on the left. That is Arab Spring, Egypt, 2011, when a 30-year-old dictatorship was toppled down by using social media. My guess is when this was happening, Russians and many others around the world were taking notes because fast forward, very similar tactics could be used and were used for Brexit. And that's the next, image. Then the re-election of some of these party leaders, and then we saw a massive, some people may have considered or called this a witch hunt, but I actually coined a term called cyber political engineering that was used to influence humans' behavior. And we'll see how. And then finally, this year, we saw the most powerful democracy in the world threatened by using these social media and how that has created this incredible divide in our society. So we have this writing on the wall that technology is changing our society. It's impacting politics. It's impacting the way we understand the world in general. So let's bring it back to XR just to set the stage, and I'm pretty sure most people here sort of understand what is XR. To me, XR is this extending reality into this other dimension, into a dimension that is not a part of our perceived reality, but sort of like opening a portal. It's an umbrella term that we use to refer to anything that sort of has a human in the loop and is our perceptual reality is being impacted by digital overlay of objects, which is augmented reality or virtual reality, where we create a completely artificial digital environment. And then there is the mixed reality, where you take the input from the real world and both ways, just like operating a forklift using your VR glasses. So to go further, I want to play a clip for you. And back in the days before I started, XR Safety Initiative, as John had mentioned, I was the head of security for Linden Lab. But prior to that, I was working for Facebook in 2016 election time during presidential election time for doing third-party security. This is not something that I was closely familiar or relate. I was familiar, but not working on. But I found this to be very, very interesting. And then I'll draw the parallel why it matters in XR. Let's watch for a second.
Digital level, where we have somewhere close to 4,000 or 5,000 data points on every adult in the United States. Finally, addressable ad technology. This is the ability to take all this offline data and to match it to drive communications. Blanket advertising. Blanket advertising, the idea that 100 million people receive the same piece of direct mail, the same television advert, the same digital advert, is dead. My children will certainly never ever understand this concept of mass communication. Today, communication is becoming ever increasingly targeted. It's being individualized for every single person in this room. So you will no longer be receiving adverts on products and services that you don't care about. Rather, you'll only receive adverts that not only are on the products and services, or in the case of elections, issues that you care about most, but that have been nuanced in order to reflect the way you see the world. We're able to match offline data to cookies to drive digital advertising, social media banners and the like. We can obviously use this data to inform direct mail purchases. So a husband in a household can receive a piece of mail, but his wife can receive a different piece of mail, possibly even on the same issue. Most exciting of all probably is the fact that we can take this data and match it to set-top box viewing data. That's television or cable data. Every time you watch TV, the programs that you're watching are being recorded, and that information is being sent back to your cable provider. And we can match what you watch in a way that we can begin to select programs to advertise in that have the highest density of the target audience that we're trying to reach. This not only dramatically reduces the cost of your advertising, but of course improves the return on investment. So what were the results? Well, Ted Cruz employed our data, our behavioral insights, to drive not just his TV and his digital, but his field operations, his get out the vote, his voter persuasion, his donation, fundraising efforts, and his resource allocation. And all of this meant that he started from a base of less than 5% and had a very slow and steady but firm rise to above 35%, making him obviously the second most threatening contender in the race. Now, clearly the Cruz campaign is over now, but what I can tell you is that of the two candidates left in this election, one of them is using these technologies, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they impact the next 7 weeks. Thank you.
I hate to play the clap on this every single time I have to intervene. But yeah, so what we saw here is this bold, appalling idea that people's data is being used, and pay attention to the 5,000 data points. Now let's look at what happens in virtual reality. I'm referring to some of the research that was conducted by Stanford University. Jeremy Bailenson had pointed out, this is about a year ago, there is way more data that is at stake now. But apparently in 20 minutes, you can get that many unique recordings of the body language. 5,000, that many. So we have to wonder, what could potentially new Cambridge Analytica look like? And then there is this whole other aspect where one of my very respected colleague, Avi Bar, Zeev, I highly recommend that you follow him on Twitter. He has some really great ideas and a brilliant critical mind to think about it. He wrote this article about the eyes of the prize. So pupil dilation to your iris scan, where you're gazing, what appeals to you, what doesn't. All of this data is up for collection. And some companies have already started collecting your body motion data, and it helps them study user behavior. It helps them improve their product. But then the issue happens when these same companies are not the good guardians of our data. And so everything that we do could potentially be used to guide us. So we already see that these type of devices, look at all the ways of collecting the data. We have, um, like you can measure your steps, how many steps you're watching. You have optoelectronic night vision, thermal imaging sensors. Like in this type of a very simple augmented reality goggles, you could pack a massive data collection machine. It's already happening with the, for example, Project Aria by Facebook has very similar glasses. It's a research only project, but we have to worry and wonder what they are after. So remember the image that I asked you about, how is it going? So keep that image, and now I'm going to show you how it is actually going when it comes to, it started with the like, and how is it going is this. Currently, we are living in an era of constant reality capture. Some of us already are. Most of us are going to be, as these devices become more ubiquitous. So what are they really after? Is the context of what is happening and how is it happening? How does a human read the book? Or how do you read the book? So remember that targeted advertising, it's a good intent to try to understand my personal behavior, so whoever is that AI agent sitting in these glasses could then tell me how I, recommend the books that I want to read, maybe even read on my behalf, the, how fast do I want to read it, how slow, what is the best comprehension method. So there is a whole world of learning, travel, social, and all sorts of things that open up, but that it's custom to me. I mean, I don't actually quite mind. I would love to have a companion app with the, like something like Data from Star Trek. Sounds weird, but why not? Why do I have to have only a human companion? Why not a AI agent companion? And I'm hoping that one day it will be here. But could we trust them? That is the point. Is all of this data collection is happening, and it can only take place if we give them the permission, and if the permission is already being taken. So what does that actually translate to, all of this data collection? Things that are being talked about and are taken into account to build. What are we building? We're building location and navigation. So like live maps. What the Pokemon Go, yeah, sure, it's gaming, but what we're really doing is we're creating this digital replica of our entire universe, all the way to what happens in space. So creating these digital twins in augmented reality environment. And that could potentially be utilized in VR as well, because it's all just data. And if you can render it and you can create this very hyper realistic environment, then why not? So location and navigation, collaboration, AR collaboration and gaming. So on Safer Internet Day, which was on 9th of February, Microsoft conducted this very amazing event, which spanned over 24 hours, where 13 different countries conducted 13 different surgeries across the world, and they coordinated and collaborated using HoloLens. So this collaboration could really solve a lot of issues, especially think about today. We want to be together, but we can't be because the COVID-19 and other strains that are emerging, they restrict us. So this whole like idea of teleportation emerges, where we can potentially have, agency, sort of autonomy, and then inevitably presence is what these companies are going after. It's not a bad pursuit to have, because we know as humanity, climate change is a real threat that's coming for us. And when that happens, we're going to need these technologies. So, what our goal really should be is to enable this particular idea. And it's going to happen anyway, but how do we do it responsibly? So, teleportation. Is another thing where we utilize this holographic presence, hyper realistic presence, to be together with each other, to do tasks together. And that is all going to be possible if we understand this context. So all of this massive data collection goes into this contextualized AI algorithm to try to understand what exactly are we doing, and then get really, really granular to the point. It's like, well, okay, Kavya wakes up at this time, and then this is the way she likes, to be woken up, and nice music. All of this context could be captured and then be presented back to us to help or improve our lives. However, there has to be considerations that are made, because this is a technology, this is an entire internet. We go from heads down culture to now heads up, where all of our internet is here, and most of our interactions and conversations are happening through either of these interfaces or virtual reality glasses. So we have to think about safety, privacy, and no matter how much we try to get ahead of things, there is always going to be unintended consequences. No one knew that Twitter's K-pop could be using Twitter in a way to offset some of the campaigns that are run using hashtags. So these are unintended sort of effects that emerge. It's a feature, not a bug, not a feature. Societal impact. I take an example. Fairly recently, I took a class. It's called the Philosophy of Responsible Innovation. There, the professor discussed about when we invented birth control pills and the impact of those birth control pills. Well, the intention was just to make our lives, more healthier and safer. But then an unintended impact was women felt more empowered, and they got so much time of their life back. And the role of men and women in the society changed. The way we perceived sex completely changed because of the introduction of birth control pills. And that can be said about many different technologies, but especially about extending realities, is going into this other magical universe. We have to think about what would be the societal impact when we go from heads down to this type of culture. And everywhere you see is a perceived or virtual or alternate reality. If we're struggling with, just few months ago, somebody or Zuckerberg said, we are not going to be the arbiter of truth. Well, then who is going to be the arbiter of our reality? Because if you expose a little child to some of these augmented reality experiences, and if they see flying dolphins, they're going to come back and say, Mommy, I know dolphins fly. Well, that's not true. So who's going to actually label that that's real and that's not real, and what that would look like? There will be user harm. What if somebody records criminal activities using these devices, and then that goes into certain, let's say they're only buffering it, keeping it for 24 hours. That is the case with, currently we're seeing the emergence of an app called Clubhouse. Same thing, they keep the audio for a specific buffer time. But during that buffer time, if there is a crime that has been committed, the cops can summon that data and they can have this data. That means now this data is up for grabs by the government and whatnot. And another thing that emerges is equitable tech, where I have access to all of these things, but what about other countries? And people talk about data monetization sometimes. I'm opposed to it in a sense that the poorest person would kind of mortgage their privacy and be like, yeah, give me $100, I'll give you all my data, or I'll check this box. So then we look at, how could we make it accessible for all? What could be the data ownership and all of these consequences, things that we start to look at. There needs to be, in order to address these things, there needs to be made consideration that are special consideration. At the moment, we're only talking about at the congressional and the global level, personal data in the UK, PII, personal identifiable information in the US, and at best, we talk about biometric data or a facial recognition data. And there are a lot of laws that are popping up against this. What it doesn't cover, however, is the inferences that can be made with the way I tilt my head, with the way I move my arm, with the way all these multi-directional, active participation of human in the loop is happening. So we proposed a term called biometrically inferred data. Once we establish that, potentially we can go after like, oh, what is the impact of this type of data collection? How is this type of data collection being used? Get into the context of inferences. I like some inferences. I like to be recommended some of the books. I like to be recommended the shopping that I should do. That's great. But do I want that inference to tell, and which it did happen, when I joined Facebook back in 2016, there was a huge pressure to join and create a Facebook account. And I asked my boss, I'm like, do I have to? But then I had to. So I did. And I put a bunch of pictures. What I didn't realize at that time, between the time that I didn't have the Facebook account and that time, I had changed my religion from Hinduism to now Islam. And my parents didn't know about it, and definitely none of my distant relatives knew about it. So the one who informed my folks in India that I have become a Muslim because I put all these hijabi pictures were that was a Facebook AI. literally started connecting me to all these Make India Great Again people that I'm remotely related to that I would probably never talk to, but they were like, if you ever dare to come to India, we will kill you. So this is just one story. Think about so many people who don't even check the privacy policy, and then there's all these genocidal things that happen based on that data collection, the inferences, your political belief system, your social belief system, or your religious beliefs, all of that is being captured. Imagine if this kind of a data, I'm going to move forward to, this is, let's say, is one of the one of the aspects of biometrically inferred data where you could really figure out how fast potentially, this is not a research, I'm not quoting a research that where it's possible, but currently you can figure out how fast is your MS, multiple sclerosis, progressing based on the typing patterns. What could happen with all the, pupil dilation, the properties, the eye status, all of these properties? What if these organizations then hand this data over to an insurance provider, and then your coverage is denied because they know way more than you do? Currently, let's say some of these projects are being worked on, let's say at Boeing or Lockheed or whatever, but just based on your cognitive load, which is currently today, we have VR headsets that actually capture cognitive load, and they offer it like it's some kind of a feature. Yes, it is. But then using that inference or that load to then say, you know what, you're not fit for work today, you go home, or maybe even prosecute somebody because you know that that person is under the influence or something. Or let's say if somebody's performed a surgery under the influence, whose liability is it going to be? Because you can actually demonstrate and articulate data-based fact, and all of these other questions start to emerge as to what do we do, where are we headed with this? So then I want to pull up a video. What does the future look like? And it is very exciting. Sometimes people think that I'm like anti, technology. I'm totally not. I am so pro, and I want to enable these technologies, and we have to find ways to enable it. So let's watch this video. What our wonderful, remarkable future could look like. And this is taken from Qualcomm. I just want to point that.
Oh, hey. Bring in Model 5A. Hi, everyone.
Oh, hey. What do you think?
I think it was great. Let's call in Darren.
Oh, hey guys, what's up?
Darren, we were wondering, could we change the color of the upholstery?
Oh yeah, definitely. Let's see, how about blue?
Works for me. What do you guys think?
Looks good. Looks good.
So this is possible today. However, we're not quite there because of the technology. But it is possible if we start to explore various cross section of, as towards the end of this video, you must have noticed, you know, um, what is the intersection of 5G, which will allow us to render and seamlessly real-time data, fast speed, low latency, and all that. And then we need to really heavily invest into edge computing, another sort of a terminology where you try to put more and more data close to the edge, close to the carrier that is going to deliver this experience to you. Then there is the artificial intelligence, which needs more and more data to be more smart to be able to facilitate this kind of experiences. So all of this is like sort of convergence that is happening. And then I want to make a
Kavya, I hate to interrupt, but we're having trouble hearing you. It sounds like your audio level dropped.
let's see, how is this?
Still a little bit quiet?
It's still a little bit quiet.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Perhaps if I move to, yeah. How is this? Because I actually, yeah. How is
That's
this?
better.
That's better? Okay. I turned up the gauge.
Ah,
There we go.
gotcha.
Okay. So are we ready to move forward?
Yes.
Okay, great. Uh, so for the first time ever, I'm going to, not for the first time, but there are a few times that I actually agree with Mark Zuckerberg. And this is one of those times where last week or so, he made a statement, we should be teleporting, not transporting. And I completely agree. Is we should think about climate change, the carbon footprints we are, putting on. And so there are so many ways that we could just literally transform this, backward idea of transporting and then be really present with each other without having to take a plane. I don't want to spend $3,000 to go to India to meet my family when I'm anyways gonna be like, oh my god, 3 days later I'm like, I can't get the hell out. And so many of us have this sort of a dilemma that we want to be with people but not have to spend that much risky scenario in today's state. So there is so much that we can do that can be, done by XR, transform how kids play and visit historical sites and all of these things. People with disabilities would have a new life. And some of this is already being done, like in desktop, for example, at Second Life, people could see these virtual worlds and be there. But now with the immersive technologies, they can actually live it. They can actually have a life while before they couldn't. But there is always a but. There are the new opportunities also bring new risks. So the risk of privacy, as I said, in the era of constant reality capture, how do we even account for privacy? What is privacy? What about safety of our data, of our brain? These applications can be hacked, or just like somebody handed the data to Cambridge Analytica that came through front door. What if it's a feature, not a bug? We really want to hand over data to third party and fourth party and fifth party. So how do we account for that third party risk? Identity, more specifically. I mean, just a couple of days ago, Judge, I'm not a cat, like that kind of a scenario could happen where people have various avatars and they're representing somebody else. They could impersonate people. There are deep fakes that would be so impossible to identify. So how do we ensure what is individual identity, and how do we ensure that individual identity is taken in account for? So what could the next Cambridge Analytica look like is something it's hard to grasp. So the way I try to grapple my head around it is by immersive data visualization, something that we'll see in this trailer. It has been kind of pointed out, and I want to just play that for you guys and think about what could the 2 million data points that we talked about. And then there is another research from Stanford where you spend 5 minutes in 360, 5 minutes watching 360-degree video, and it could accurately attribute among a subset, pre-recorded subset of 500 users within 5 minutes, which of the 500 user is that person. So you can actually attribute your identity in a matter of 5 minutes. And that's the power of these technologies. Let's see what has been happening in the traditional sense.
All of your interactions, your credit card swipes, web searches, locations, likes, they're all collected in real time into a $1 trillion a year industry.
The real game changer was Cambridge Analytica. They worked for the Trump campaign and for the Brexit campaign. They started using information warfare.
Cambridge Analytica claimed to have 5,000 data points on every American voter.
I started tracking down all these Cambridge Analytica ex-employees.
Someone else that you should be calling to committee is Brittany Kaiser.
Brittany Kaiser, once a key player inside Cambridge Analytica, casting herself as a whistleblower.
The reason why Google and Facebook are the most powerful companies in the world is because last year data surpassed oil in value. Data is the most valuable asset on Earth. We targeted those whose minds we thought we could change until they saw the world the way we wanted them to.
Hey
Did you know that the targeting tool was considered a weapon?
There is a possibility that the American public have been experimented on.
This is becoming a criminal matter. When people see the extent of the surveillance,
I think that they're going to be shocked. And while I'm not in favor or in denial, but I think there is a valuable insight in this movie, which is seems highly biased. However, the immersive data visualization gives you this perspective of all the stuff that we're giving away and all that has been collected about us, and it is only going to grow tremendously, and it is growing on a daily basis. And so we have to question then, are regulations the answer? And then every time I think about regulations, or should we leverage these, or how are we going to go about it? Well, the challenge with regulations and regulators is they don't quite understand a lot of these intricacies of technology, so there is this gap that happens. However, regulations are the only thing, at least one of the major motivators for these gigantic organizations to do the right thing. Otherwise, on their own, they will talk about responsible principle, innovation principle, but we would barely see when the actions come about. All they want is grab more data. And so there is this huge disconnect between what is said, what is done, and then there is the disconnect between the knowledge that our regulators, our regulating agencies have. They're becoming better, but they're still not quite there. And this is where I would say XR Safety Initiative, that I'm the founder of, fits in with the mission of helping build safe and inclusive immersive environment. And I'm just going to play this quick video as well, which sort of sums it up, because I spent a lot of time to really think about what I want to say, and it's condensed into the video. I'm just going to play this for you. What is it that we are trying to do at XRSI, and how that can be, that fits in together?
Is it possible for a team to succeed in their research and development plans without considering the implications of trust, privacy, inclusion, and safety? This is a fundamental question of my mission to support individuals, corporations, universities, and government entities. We want them to reach their goals of developing emergent tech while making sure that safe and inclusive experiences are at the forefront of every key decisions they make. My name is Kavya Pearlman, and I believe that it is critical for research and development teams to keep that question in mind. This is why I founded XR Safety Initiative. We believe in the potential of XR, VR, AR, and AI technologies as a driving force of good in the modern age. But we also recognize the risks and threats that reveal themselves through these tools. Our desire is to mitigate those risks. We do this by bringing together the brightest minds who have a passion for emerging technologies to work together towards these pillars of our research. The future is bold, unknown, and sometimes a little scary. But as we emphasize the prominence of this question and deliver resources that keep it in front of the eyes of the world's leaders in XR, we will find a future that is safe, secure, and full of hope.
So, those of you who did not know, XR Safety Initiative, it is a 501c3 non-for-profit organization. We are listed on ANSI as SDO, Standard Developing Organization, the very first for XR, and we're promoting privacy, security, and ethics in the immersive domain. And essentially, by bringing together multidisciplinary experts to look at these issues in a different light, some of them actually hack virtual reality, augmented reality, to figure out what are the potential new cyber attacks that are possible. In fact, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is a very first such global effort where we are positioned to provide impartial, practical information that will allow us to mitigate some of these XR or spatial computer related risks, and give people, sort of individual corporation, a governance framework of some sort, so that middle person who informs the governments as well as the organizations and creates individual awareness around these things. So the effort that John during the introduction pointed out that is currently ongoing is the XRSI privacy framework. And the framework's goal is really to help individuals, organizations address a comprehensive set of privacy needs, enabling more innovative and effective solutions that take a deeper look at this development work, because I alone and many other people, we've sent about 1,000 invites. About 600 or so people said, yes, we want to be part of it. We have about 200 active researchers that are working on this effort. So I encourage you to go to xrsi.org, PSF11, and take a look at what's being done. There is some of the information that's already there in the form of video and text. And if I may go a little bit deeper what that looks like. So currently XRSI Privacy Framework version 1.0 has these aspects. These are the high level aspects that we are exploring. So 4 focus areas: assess, inform, manage, prevent. And you'll see the usage and the placement of things is quite deliberate. So informed consent, for example. We're not just talking about some check the box. We need context to be able to check any box if we need to. We need to just not just check the box, but have choices around it. And then a way, a mechanism that allows us a control over our data. And then, of course, there is that aspect of child safety previously still thought about, like we should at least inform vulnerable population, more specifically children, how are they impacted by these, your technology, app, platform, whatever it is, that is the form of XR that you're a stakeholder of. So what does it mean? This framework has then 14 different functions, but all the way up to 125 controls. Very agile, community driven, and we are totally just thinking about how can we solve this instead of like, how can we check the box? How can we solve bystander rights, for example? How can we think about human rights, vulnerable population, people with disability? How would they check the box when they can't see something? So should there be some nudges, point in time audio, audio output for privacy policy? All of these things are being under consideration, and a lot of the work that might appeal to you. For example, if you think about risk, so we're thinking about risk not just from like a cybersecurity perspective, but like what could be the human risks? People could become way addictive to these technologies. And how would an organization make it addictive to thinking about what could dark patterns look like in the XR environment? And I just threw that word in there. If you could just even Google it, you'll come across a website called darkpattern.org, has a nice video that shows what that dark pattern means. Or societal risks, just like when birth control pill was introduced, our society changed. This is another technology, and it's not just one technology. When we extend realities, there is going to be societal impact. And when we extend reality, we're not just talking about VR and AR, we're talking about the intersection of artificial intelligence, 5G, XR in general, which covers all the AR, VR, MR. But then there is whole another element of even robotics, because a person sitting in Japan is just thinking he's playing a video game, but what he's really doing is putting cans in a shelf in a 7-Eleven. So that robotics element, using virtual reality to control robots or droids and all of that, it's already in play. So our goal is to look at it from various different angles. Then there is the legal risk. So what if a app that claims that hey, it's going to mitigate your schizophrenia or mental health, what if it makes it worse? who's going to be liable for these things? So that's the novel type of legal risk. There are other risks. What if somebody steals your virtual property and or says this is mine? How do you even establish truth in that time? Financial risks, of course, when as we move more and more towards the digital, fully immersive virtual environments, integrity checking, like, if I want to order something using these glasses, it's still the same data. Are we going to rely on PCI compliance for integrity checking of that payment method? Or what are we going to do? Here is another technology that is intersecting with XR. And I want to point out, the aspects that are really, really important. Eye tracking, motion tracking is, that sort of whole ecosystem of brain-computer interface and the intersection of XR is already starting to emerge. And it's going to be so intertwined with our extended realities in the future. Let's see if this video plays real quick. This is actually this is just a prototype that a friend, or I could call him a friend, I met with him, Alex Castillo. He's the CEO of a brain-computer interface company called Notion. What this kid is wearing is he's wearing a Notion too, and so Alex is probably playing with the API and how he's using his mind to pop these trees in augmented reality. It's pretty remarkable. So this is where we are, and there is a lot more that I'm sure that is being done behind the closed doors that we're probably not aware of, but it's coming for us. Another very simple, very kind of harmless aspect that is very, very powerful for XR is the spatial audio. And why I feel compelled today to point out why spatial audio. Well, one, for me, it's a threat vector. But there is this other very much deeper analysis of spatial sound and audio that needs to be considered and looked at as we try to wrap our head around what could be good and bad. So I want to play this video about a particular research that informs to us how our extended realities are going to be shaped. So let's watch it.
Imagine your brain hears my voice and believes that I'm right there with you. That's the magic of audio presence. It is something the audio research team here at Facebook Reality Labs is building for our future AR glasses and VR headsets. Vamos a repasar, Sebastián.
So in Tomex speaking to me,
Hi. Blah, 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 blah.
the sound hits one of my ears just before the other one. Also, the volume is slightly different in each ear. We call this interaural time and level differences. On top of that, sound waves also interact with the environment, bouncing off the walls before making it into your ear. And the shape of the ear changes how every one of us hears sound. No two people's ears are exactly alike. By combining all these elements, we've implemented some cool systems that allow us to overcome these challenges and create a feeling of real audio presence. This is an actual demo where a person tries to guess which sounds are coming from the loudspeakers in the room and which sounds are actually virtual, reproduced by their headphones.
It's so impossible to tell. I don't know what the difference is.
I got tricks.
It's very difficult. A lot of it felt like guessing.
And then there is the ear problem, finding each person's head-related transfer function, or HRTF. That is what this room is actually for. We track how sound hits your ear so that we can recreate exactly how you hear. It's a state-of-the-art anechoic chamber. But it's not exactly scalable. So what we're trying for is an algorithm that can find your personal HRTF from a photograph. Y estamos muy cerca. But these are only pieces of a larger puzzle. Dozens of other technologies need to fall into.
Okay. So one of the things that was enlightening to me about this particular research is that all of us have a unique ear signature. And when I told that to my nerd friend, it was like, no, that's not true. And I had to play the whole video to prove that, and also look into that is the reality. So it's not just the iris scan, it's not just the fingerprints. There is all these other human elements that are unique. And once you capture those in order to innovate, there is a lot of responsibility on that other person to not weaponize those. Or what if somebody could take over your sound, potentially replace it in if somebody's malicious? then there is a lot that you could do. You see that in sci-fi movies like Spider-Man Far From Home, has this video where has this instance where the person can't see there is a train coming and there is an overlay in his field of view, but is almost walks into that train coming incoming train because couldn't see through the augmented reality filter. So all of this is very, very much possible in the very near future. Another technology that I want to point out is 5G. And why, that's why the intersection of these technologies we have to like keep up with. So on the opening day of the 2019 KBO season, Saturday this happened on March 23, 2019, SK Telecom brought this mythical dragon-like animal to this 5G equipped SK Happy Dream Park. And this large breathing animal was like live streamed and live through this sports broadcasting channel. Let's take a look how we would see reality in the very near future. So the point is, this very hyper realistic scenario is possible today, has been, the proof of concept is right there. And since then, the 5G network that is inevitably going to be deployed everywhere, going to become ubiquitous, has been looked at from the critical eye. European Commission, and I have the reference of it. So European Commission put together this network security analysis and what could go wrong type of analysis, the risks related to the 5G network deployment. There could be spying and on the 5G data. So confidentiality, we have a term in network security called CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. All of that is in question. And then more closer and faster these things are, if somebody modifies your reality, it's going to be really hard to detect unless you're looking at the bits and bytes. So that's where then the focus should be is to how do we forensically investigate stuff? And we're not even looking at it forensically as yet. We're barely scratching the surface of what are the bad things that could happen. But of course, this is a little bit of an outdated data, but there is definitely more updated data around 5G, and we need to keep track of these things because there are risks associated with the technology itself. Let me see if I can. So I want to pause here with this quote. I talked about a lot of different concepts, but when it comes to privacy, it's like oxygen. You won't feel it. It's invisible. It's easy to ignore until it's gone. And at that point, I want to segue into another topic, which is safety. And we talk about safety here. And not just security or not just cybersecurity. And why safety? Because as let me play this sort of the next video, and you will see why safety. So we're thinking at XRSI, attacks inside virtual reality, and there has been proof of concept and actual attacks that were carried out in virtual reality that any bad guys could actually do that. So why safety and not just cybersecurity or security? In order to think about it, let me just play this quick video and then I'll talk about that. And this is myself and our communication director, Marco Mariano. We were at Augmented World Expo and playing just a bunch of games. Just let's take a quick look. So the point of the video is there I am in VR. I am fully immersed in this environment where him and I, we're in this social VR setting and we're killing bugs. They're coming at us fast. And as you can see here, it's not just the computer system, it's not just the network. When it comes to attack surface, it is our surroundings, it is our living room, it is now our brain too, because that gets impacted as well. So when it comes to VR cyber attacks or VR attacks, the attack surface is different. It's not no longer just, the your AWS servers or your web applications or the social network. There is more than just data. People can manipulate your environment, and then that could cause issues. So this is just a detailed overview of how the attack surface has now gone from just being applications to now we're talking about your living room and all of that stuff. So back in 2019, our senior advisor, Ibrahim Bajili, who is also the assistant dean of New Haven University of New Haven, his team conducted this kind of an exercise where they carried out these proof of concept cyber attacks and then presented some artifacts that could be potentially useful to mitigate these type of attacks. They assumed that the machine was already compromised, and this is done in a tethered headset, done using tethered headset, something like this, like an Oculus headset or some other Vive headset. And what they were able to do is they were able to modify configurations, set up command and control server by exploiting some of the cyber vulnerabilities. They discovered novel cyber attacks in VR, and I've gone around the world talking about it over and over, and some people dismiss it, but I not letting up on this because this is the reality that's going to catch up to us pretty fast. Is they demonstrated the tracker attack, look where you are, human joystick, chaperone, and overlay attack. So the tracker attack is possible when you have cameras tracking you inside out or outside in tracking, and somebody hijacks this camera, be able to literally see what you're doing. And in today's world, it's even, they can just ask you, you'll just give them permission, and then game on. Like, they're literally seeing all that stuff that is in your vicinity. They also nailed on this chaperone attack. So by just shrinking and expanding these safety boundaries, they can actually, manipulate your mind, whether you're in a safe zone or not. They could literally just make it disappear as well, which could be really dangerous because it could create a hazardous situation. So far, there has only been one recorded death due to somebody playing VR. And we will never know whether there was any kind of a foul play involved because nobody did the investigation. There is no data, there is no methodology. So when these crimes start to happen in VR using these cyber means, we're going to need these mechanisms and measures in place. Another attack that Abe's team recorded is human joystick attack. In this attack, and we're seeing, so if you look at the green dot at the bottom, that's where the subject is supposed to be and is, statically standing there and sort of moving around in the environment. But that many applications were over and over configuration modified and manipulated. So in a few minutes time, once they take off the headset, what they realize is they're not in the left of this room, but all the way up there. So be able to move a human subject without their knowledge in a VR environment. You combine that with, chaperone, and if a person is a person of interest, you could potentially kill somebody. And this is probably not so relevant today, but it will be pretty soon as we have more standalone VR glasses or, more and more adoption of these things happen. What about overlay attack? And then that's another one that they, demonstrated is be able to take over your field of view and not letting it up. And if, let's say, if I'm a hacker, that could be a way to say, hey, unless you give me X amount of Bitcoins, I'm not going to let this up. Or just, I know that pornography is a huge deal and a whole another domain that's about to or is almost exploding in the virtual reality or immersive part. And so if you want to remain private while you're watching some type of content and somebody else has the information of it, maybe they can stream it to the media or live, and that could be very embarrassing, and definitely without consent that could be very, very bad for you too. So what we came up with that sort of a research, based on that research, based on the attacks uncovered so far, is that we need to have categories of risk that must be mitigated. So we need to protect the data. So data protection, how these third parties may be taking the data, how they may be processing it, user interaction protection. So if I can just send you a little malicious link in the chat in a social environment, then where is the safety? Where is the security? So when people interact in these environments, it's important that we pay attention to their protection. And then device protection. One could literally be installing some device to eavesdrop on everything that you're doing. So I'm just going to grab a little water. Let's segue into a third pillar of this talk, which is ethics. So I would start with a story where back in the days when I was the head of security, and I walked into this really nice, it was a beach environment, and I used to love going to that, virtual beach and just hang out in the sun, and did something in my brain. But one of these days I appeared there, and one of the creators is just like, F you, F this, F that. And it was just it was overwhelming to face that abuse in a sense. Even though, I was, I'm the person they shouldn't be abusing and all that, but whoever this creator was kind of mad. But what happens as a result, and I used to spend a lot of time in VR within that platform. As a result, I just stopped. I didn't want to go back to VR because I especially did not want to go back to that beach, because apparently I had been abused, mentally abused by all these very intimate, abusive words that were said to me. It took me about 3 days to like almost a week to come back to some sense of normality. So you have to think about these type of things will happen in VR. We already have a really horrific sort of gaming culture where women complain all the time that they're being harassed just as they show up as a woman. So as a woman, this is going to be a real challenge to grapple with.
Hey, Kavya, it looks like you're muted and your video froze for a minute there.
Yeah, it seems like my internet had a fluke. So am I sharing my screen? Probably not.
Not at the moment.
Gotcha. How is this? Am I now sharing the video?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Sorry about that. So it looks like my internet just had a little fluke there. So we are back, and we were talking about, how virtual world, it's a virtual world, but it has real world threats where kids could be manipulated and a lot of things could go wrong in that sense. Let's look at how it offers opportunities. So there is another very amazing professor, Courtney Cogburn, who has put together this 1,000-cut journey that allows a person to have an experience of being in VR and step into a African American person's first person point of view, what is it like to be them for X amount of time? And that can be really eye-opening. So we can use these technologies to create opportunities that to make more empathetic experiences, so people cultivate empathy in a way, show empathy, educate people. How should you be acting if there has been some kind of misconduct that took place? So there is this other aspect that is really fast coming at us, is reviving our dead ones. So do the deads consent? Does the person's likeness, who you're using, stand in for that consent? And I want to play this video. I generally don't, because most people are familiar, but just for a few seconds, let me play this video.
You married the most genius man in the whole world, Kanye West.
Okay, so we revived a person here, and at the moment, this may not be based on, I don't have all the details how this was done, but this may not have been based on the person's real memories and stuff. But what if that is? And then the AI calculates that, the previous presidents, maybe that is, we could use hologram to do campaigning. So previous president endorses this other president. Because when this came out, Kanye West was actually running for president. So how are we going to make sense of all this? And then do we really want to upload ourselves and live forever? And then when that happens, inevitably people are going to exploit your emotions. Because, there was a video that went viral in 2020 where this Korean mother, her daughter had died due to cancer, and she was just like brought back up in a virtual reality setting. And the mother was just so, overall, it was a good experience because she got some closure, but people will definitely weaponize human emotions to keep you and keep you coming back for more of their app, data, whatever they are after. Talking about ethics, I see this is another aspect that I want to point out that not a lot of people talk about, is the culture of spectators. So what I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube, internet, where, people are just taking picture or recording when somebody's having this extended reality experience, and they're just laughing or they're just mocking them. And I think we need to normalize this. Not the idea that you should be mocking or whatever. You need to understand this person is in a totally different reality, so they should be left alone. So if you can't see their immersive reality, what they're in, at the very minimum, no one should be touching them in a way that's uncomfortable. And that gets even more complicated when you're in a research setting and you're trying to facilitate research. Now the concept of what's a good touch and bad touch. So all of these discussions we need to have up front, so that people are not made to walk into a wall or jump off of something and hurt themselves, and you're just like, a bunch of people are just taking pictures of this. So we need to build this culture of spectators being totally okay that this is our new reality, and it has to be deliberate and equitable. Otherwise, there is embarrassment all around, but there could be harassment all around too. In order to help with some of these aspects as to what could we do, with XRSI, created this week, which is the second week of December. We call the XR Safety Awareness Week. And during this week, you can now go to www.xrsi.org, find this extend reality with awareness. So this guide that gives you this basic cyber hygiene to, like, if you are an indie developer, what is this plethora of risks that you could be thinking about? How to then dive further into this domain and what to do, where to go from there. So this is a guidebook that is available. It goes from use a password manager, VPN, all of that stuff, to much deeper things that we sort of facilitate as a nonprofit. And there are other standards that I would also encourage you to look at it. But this one is for everybody. It's not just for artists. Anybody can just download this guide and follow a couple of these cyber hygiene stuff and would be good. Lastly, before I kind of close out how we are kind of grappling our head around and leading this narrative is first of all by creating awareness. So we continuously explore multiverses and expose the limit of extended reality and try to raise awareness among people, just like I'm doing right now. But this particular video is from one of our podcasts that is called Singularity Watch, where we bring in people into this immersive environment and sort of try to ask very strategic, methodical questions to solve or to pursue the very mission to help build safe and inclusive XR experiences. So this is EFF Deputy Executive Director Kurt Opsahl. I'm just going to play this clip real quick to give you a taste of what are we after.
Seems like what you're saying is pretty consistent with what we heard one other guest. She's a neuro researcher and is paying attention to XR, Sophia Bachelor. And it was quite insightful when she mentioned, self-governance could be one of those things. And, we're kind of working on the privacy framework for that. And I feel like that's probably, would you say, that company could pay attention to, where they take control, they take in consideration context of what is being shared, but make their own sort of rules until we have those external laws and regulations.
And it's certainly, I think, there's something very useful for companies taking a lead in self-governance. But I think a lot of people are suspicious that companies don't have their interests at heart. Some of the companies operating in the tech space, there has been a history of privacy problems, and it's important if you're doing any kind of self-governance work to do it in a way that earns people's trust and verification, so that if you say, okay, we're going to do these things to protect you, do these things that will help with the privacy issues, that they trust that actually will happen, that you're not going to be using some word choice there that gives you an out. And a lot of this trust violations have come from people saying, we're going to collect this information for this purpose. You're like, great, that's the purpose I like, I want you to do that. And then they're like, hey, I'm going to use this information for a new purpose now. And I'm not going to ask because, that's the way I roll.
So that was, this is just, the point of awareness that we're trying to create by various avenues. And so Ready HackerOne, Singularity Watch, and many other efforts. And as we talked about self-governance, Kurt was validating the idea of this self-governance, but that alone is not going to be enough. So two things that I just want to point out is this privacy and safety framework development that's ongoing, version 1.1. Once it's concluded, we plan to hand this to various data protection agencies, governments around the world, that this is a sort of ongoing, iterative, community-driven work, so that they could potentially adopt some of these things into regulations. And how does that happen? We actually recently consulted a lot of our advisors and put together recommendations for Biden-Harris administration. So some of the policy work is also involved, and these are just 4 key recommendations that we put together. What we really need help with is making sure that we reach the right tables, and this kind of recommendation reaches the right people who can then now start putting together this bipartisan industry review board or some kind of a forum for all the involved stakeholders. So these recommendations were made. We will see how this informs and influences our future and regulations. But in closing, I just want to say, we began with this question that if we are going to extend realities using AR, VR, what kind of a world do we want to create? So in closing, please allow me to leave you with this suggestion for a, kind of a unique, very audacious aim for XR. So the ultimate aim for XR should be to make sure that people are not targeted, not harassed, not murdered because who they are or where they come from or who they love or how they pray. And all it all begins with demanding our rights, asking for the ability to choose beyond just a mandated login that puts us in more closed walled gardens of monopoly, or at the mercy of this organization with a poor track record of, their tactics causing even genocide or undermining democracies around the world. So I urge you to get involved with these efforts like XRSI and help us reach those right tables, right rooms where these decisions are being made for the future of, all of us. And many of us are concerned but not yet involved in the process. So I urge you to demand for the rights for privacy. And remember, we may not win this struggle, but when we look back for a few years from now, at least we won't regret that we remained complacent or never even tried. And with that, I am going to look at our chat, see if you guys have any questions. First, let me look at the chat. And then there is a Q&A option. And so far, there are no open questions I see in Q&A. John, if you want to jump in and see.
Yeah. So yeah, while people are typing some questions into Q&A, there's a couple of things that immediately jump to mind for me. One is that, first of all, thank you for showing all of that. And, part of it I'm absolutely in love with, part of it I'm absolutely terrified by. And that's, pretty much how things roll at this point. But my question is, how much of the risk that you're talking about is inherent in the actual technologies that are being used, and how much is due to the way that they're being rolled out in the companies that are creating and controlling them? So I'm thinking in terms of a lot of the data collection that you're talking about is a potential risk because it's being captured by companies that may be using it to profile or sell or whatever it may be. But are the actual technologies so dependent upon things like cloud computing that there is no equivalent way to have the tech work without the inherent risk? Is there a way to do any of it locally?
Right. That's a good question, and a question that must be thought through. How much of the risk is coming from the way we use it, or how much is it coming from the way it is intended to be used? So there is a term in, it's called Coolidge dilemma, is that you can't really wrap your head around how, or make this technology work intentionally in the way it's supposed to be unless you have this large amount of data. But by the time that you have this technology work and have all this large amount of data, it may already be too late. We are somewhere in the middle trying to sort of figure out, like, is this the time to regulate? Is this not? And with the intersection of 5G, so many, political and other things going on with that, and artificial intelligence, their own silos of AI ethics, and how do we deal with that? So it's very hard. It's very difficult to even forget about quantifying the risk, but just qualitative, speculate what that could be. And that's why, I alone couldn't look at it because I have a one-sided mind. I'm like doom and gloom, dystopia, whatever. But then there is other storytellers that come in. They talk about opportunities, and then they bring this other perspective. I think that's the quest that we are on. We're literally asking that very question, is like, what is the risk? How can we, in that privacy and safety framework, when we come together, that's the goal. And so I hope I had the answer, but I don't. But I'm spending this, January all the way to April with like 200 plus people such as yours, and you're obviously part of that framework development. So hopefully we will have better answers towards the end of this.
Kavya, there's a question from one of our attendees that's what ethics concerns are associated with the inequitable allocation of XR? And that strikes me as, both in terms of, when you were talking about 5G, we know that there are going to be inequities with the rollout of 5G, right? And then there are the other kinds of inequities that are about, where are the safe locations going to be, where are the technologies going to be, et cetera. So do you have thoughts about this, the particular kind of ethical concerns that are associated with inequitable allocation?
Right. Yeah. Very good question. And thank you for that question. So many ways, right? So hardware, software, in-world ecosystem. And we're looking at all of this. Let's look at hardware. The cost of hardware, a good hardware, as we are hearing in Apple rumors, the one that may potentially provide us the solution to XR privacy, may. We don't know what's underneath this black box, but we just know that $3,000. Now, how many people does that leave aside? And then look at the Facebook aspect, where in the name of creating accessibility, we are literally forcing people to have a Facebook login. And because, oh, well, the headsets are cheaper and allow us this data collection. So this very piss poor guardian of our data that has been validated and proven over time is now saying, hey, I'll give you a cheap headset. And it's not cheap. It's $300+. So even then, there is this whole segment of society. So this digital divide continues to get bigger and bigger as we roll out these devices, these systems, and not be making it equitable. Then there is so I talked about hardware. Then there is the software about the data. Let's say we find a way. Some of the people always ask me, it's like data monetization. It's like, hey, I will pay you to give me your data. Let's do that. Then what happens? The person who needs $100 to do their grocery is going to mortgage their privacy, check all the boxes and be like, hey, you know what? I need this. So that means the rich person is going to have better privacy, just like they have the, multi-million-dollar island in Hawaii. I can't afford that. A poor person can't afford that. If I need $10, I'll check the box, install an app, and now I have a discount on my Victoria's Secret $10 to $1. And people do that because that's normal, You can't expect people not to want money and sustenance. So that's another one. Then there is a third, very, really interesting aspect that we're actually exploring right now is the in-word representation. So I wear hijab. And you saw in one of my in-world video where I had this sort of a hijabi coverage as an in-world avatar. But this was recorded in Allspace VR. Allspace VR did not have hijab. They had, from the beginning, cowboy hats, but not a hijab. Because that's not a priority. How many hijabi women are out there? And I said something about it, and I got that hijab in-world representation in 3 weeks. There are platforms that we evaluated. It literally is Chad and Trixie, blonde and blue hair. Can you imagine, in this current climate, being an African-American female and put in a VR headset, and you are embodied as some blonde and white person? That is appalling. It's abhorrent. But unless somebody knows and feels that, it's not going to matter. And then if we let this perpetuate, and if I don't say, hey, bring on hijab, bring on shaders for skin colors and whatnot, this is going to be normal. So then we are creating this in-world divide. And another divide would be like people who understand critically what they are giving away. Then there are others who just follow and jump into these reality. Oh, I don't care. You know what? I got nothing to lose. And then they're just giving away all this data. They're becoming the tool for weapon. They're becoming a weapon because, some people who don't pay attention to their own machines get infected, and then they are calling Russia. The machines go. So you've just, just by not caring about these things, you are contributing to that problem. So there's so many ways this is inequitable when it comes to XR. It's like so many angles that we need to watch out from and look and create that equity. I'm gonna look at and yep. So yeah, this is my life, and I'm glad that there is so many more people that are making it their life's mission and creating awareness and creating equity.
I wonder, Kavya, while we have a minute, if you have any thoughts. So within the disability studies community, and which is a large and varied kind of community, right? There are a fair number of discussions of, right, what the possibilities are for augmented virtual reality, extended reality, and what the the limitations are, right? And one of the narratives in the kind of like masculinist futurist sort of vision, right, is that we will free all of our bodies from any of their sort of mortal coils, right? That we won't age, we can upload ourselves to the computer, we won't age, we won't die. But there's also this narrative, right, that like we will fix all of the disabilities. And there are a number of people who push back against this idea that the able-bodied is a singular goal that we should be pushing ourselves towards, and instead that we might want to think about bodies as coming in and out of able-bodiedness all the time, right? That illness is a phenomenon that is just part of our lives. I wonder if you've talked with anyone who's talked about that kind of like conceptual terrain around XR and its relationship to disability at all.
Two names that come to my mind, and I'm certainly not the person to even talk about it, but this is the best part of the XRSI is we have people who are super experts in this. So Thomas Logan, he's part of our coalition, the CyberXR coalition, which is a diversity and inclusion effort. He owns this company, Equal Entry. So I know for a fact that they are looking at it all the way to spiritual aspects of it, how it impacts our own humanity. So Thomas Logan from Equal Entry. Then there is another person, Bill Curtis Davidson, and he is from XR Access. So those two organizations are the ones that will potentially, if they don't have the answer, they're definitely exploring it. In fact, they are meeting 2 a.m. my time, 2 a.m. They formed this sort of sub-accessibility group, and they meet on Saturday because Thomas is in Japan. So they meet at 2 o'clock, the UK friendly time. This time I'm going to make this meeting. Last time I was like, Saturday night, who wants to wake up? But I think I will bring that question back to Thomas potentially and ask him if there is an answer to this or they're exploring. But those two groups are definitely one to watch, because what they're helping us do is infuse accessibility into privacy. How do you do that? Is like privacy is not just to be informed to a abled person, but there is many variations. So there needs to be various mechanisms to tell people, to inform them just in time, this is what will happen if you do this, and taking those things in consideration. So I think that's the group.
That's great. Thank you. It looks like there is a new question in the Q&A now.
All right. Yeah. And then the question is, how is it possible to guarantee that people who will regulate this technology participating in data collection and invasion of privacy instead of preventing it? Very good question. And my internet is kind of unstable. It's indicating if you lose me, but I just want to mention it. So thank you for that question. And it is a very good question to think about, because how do we trust the watcher? Who watches the watcher? And that's why when we sent this recommendation to Biden-Harris administration, it includes a bipartisan review board. It includes a independent multi-stakeholder forum. And that's what will be necessary to watch the watcher, a independent regulatory body, because we're really developing a new internet. It's not quite there yet. But when we do, who's going to control the internet? Who's going to be the arbiter of our truth and reality? We need to have those bodies in place. EU Commission is kind of catching on to this. Australian government that's now working with us actively on this framework, they're catching on to it. They're making positioning statement. So governments are aware of this, but don't let them be the arbiter and taker of all this data. Have someone like XRSI, with our principle being ethical, unbiased, and true to this mission. You see, when you see this person and our advisors, passion oozes off of us. We're really genuinely concerned. And so find these people and then connect those and promote them to that place where they will have the conversation on your behalf and advocate your interests, where other organizations are lobbying and representing the interests of big tech corporations. So that's where I would pitch in and petition to, donate to XRSI, get involved with XRSI, keep up with what we're doing. And that's the only way we're going to be able to. We shouldn't trust governments. That's the bottom line. We should tell them how this needs to be happening and keep them in check, all of the governments, not just the United States. So it's a very tough question. How do we trust them? We don't. We can't. They haven't demonstrated they are good either. It's like take matters in our own hands or something.
There's also another question in the chat as well. This has been absolutely fascinating. And I agree with that. Two related questions. How do we ensure that technology is equitable without discouraging individuals from innovation? And whose responsibility is it to enforce equity?
So January 20th, right? A new administration arrived. They put 11 executive order. One of them was creating racial equity. Another one was creating another like social justice type of thing. So I think whose responsibility is it? It is every single person's responsibility from the top because they can and they must. And thank God that they are. We are now getting um, even interpreters or speakers on screen to give that accessibility more focus. So it needs to happen from government. Then we need to force these organizations to be more equitable and inform them how to be. So fairly recently, so in May of 2019, we put together a top 10 accessibility checklist. Then when we talked to Facebook Reality Lab, made a very clear-cut recommendation saying, hey, devs should have some kind of checklist. So in November, that sort of a checklist came about, and now Oculus has this developer accessibility checklist so that when they are coding, so this is kind of the, this is the progression of those equitable measures. You point them out, you come up with an idea, you talk to the right people, we go to the right tables and talk about it, send the recommendation over here, talk to the government entities and all of that. And that's what is probably what we need to do. It is all of our responsibility to create this equity. It's like when you see somebody doing bad stuff in real life and you're just a spectator and you're like, I don't want to get involved. Well, it's your responsibility to get involved. You see that particular measure could be better for a person who is disabled. Well, then point that out to the right entity or company. Call your senators, be like, hey, this is going on and I'm really concerned. This is going to be a huge digital divide for people with disability. Have you looked at that? I know they're not thinking about XR. Maybe when 50 people call, they'd be like, okay, maybe I should talk to XRSI. So I think it's all of our responsibility. And how do we do that? It's still like a question that we are exploring. I don't know the perfect answer to it. And it seems like there is another question here. So do you think that the benefits of widespread XR use outweigh the many risks that you outlined? Today, yes, absolutely. I want to absolutely go there. So the exercise of calculating the risk, speculating the risk, it is not so we could stop this train. It is so that we could build a rail, a path to navigate these uncharted territories in a safe and responsible manner. So yes, today, please don't be thinking that we are coming in to just stop this thing or risks are too heavy that we shouldn't explore it. Well, first of all, we don't have a choice. So yeah, I think the benefits are really remarkable. Being able to do surgeries, be able to be together. There's just so much good stuff in these technologies. So this conversation should be intrinsic part of this development is what is necessary, but not like after the effect. It needs to happen yesterday and today. That's kind of the point. And yeah, I'm really thoroughly enjoying this Q&A and all the session. Thank you, both of you, and thank you, Dartmouth, for facilitating this. And as we're talking, we extend this participation to Dartmouth University, especially this ongoing development, to any academic that wants to participate. We invite you to be an official contributor, so you could put your logo on these things along with Government of Australia and a bunch of other people that will add more weight to what our work is, critique that work. Nonprofits, if you want to contribute, we want your logo. For for-profits, we'll create a separate section to create buy-in, and we would call them supporters. So if FRL wants to support us, they need to pay us money, and it would be very clear that they paid us $10,000, everybody, flat rate, and then we can just kind of put their name in the supporter that they recognize this is an important effort, which has been recognized by them, by Twitter and other medias, but we want an official support, an official buy-in, and hopefully this will help.
Yeah, I think that would be absolutely wonderful, and I'm glad that I'm able to do what little I can on some of the documents that you're putting together. I've seen a lot of tremendous work being done by other people, and I really hope that we can get some more folks here interested and engaged with what you're doing, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for, contributing, Jackie, you too, and bringing in Jackie into the mix too.
Absolutely. Well, I think that we're pretty much out of questions. Well, I have a few others, but I will let them go because I could keep going for quite a while. And eventually people need to get back to their lives. So thank you very much, Kavya. Very much appreciate it. Yes, and thanks again to Jackie and DHSE. Thanks to from Media Studies and to ITC for getting you in here to talk to us. It's been wonderful, and I hope that we can support you more going forward.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending.